Alright, so obviously things have drastically changed since the last time we did this, but luckily streaming looks like it's going to be on our side for the time being and for however long that takes. It's to my understanding, I think, that Bloodshot won't be streaming until Tuesday, but I hope my memory's still there of it, because I did see Bloodshot when it came out, like, right before I decided that going outside wasn't such a good idea for a while. So, because I was going to see it and The Hunt, and then it was like, well, maybe just to be out as little as possible, I'll go to one of them and then see what happens. Uh, and of course it was fucking Bloodshot. So, after I got back from Bloodshot, I was like, I don't need to do a video on that by itself. What would be the point of that? So I just kind of held out to see what was going to happen, and then the whole streaming thing came up. And of course, as of now, all the stuff that's on streaming is stuff that I've already talked about outside of The Hunt. So I guess we'll see what happens as it goes on. But in the meantime, let's go into these three and start with Bloodshot, so that I can go the rest of the way forgetting about it, pretty much. So, I didn't really know much of what it was, except that Vin Diesel had put out another movie that wasn't a Fast and Furious movie, or a Riddick movie, or whatever the hell else he does. I was thinking there was one more franchise he does, but there's so many I don't even remember now. And usually when he... Triple X, that's the other one. I guess. So, this one just sort of seemed like it was going to be some generic sci-fi action movie or whatever. I did not realize that it was a comic, or for that matter, apparently a very widely acclaimed novel, or comic. So, the thing is I had heard that the word wasn't very good on it, but it was like, Vin Diesel can go one of two ways. Like I say, it's not a franchise movie, then it's probably forgettable or not worth a shit or whatever. Even though many of his franchise movies are as well. Um, it's not that bad. It's really not great at all. There's a whole lot of everything is derivative of everything thing, but surprisingly, it's a movie that's got a little bit more up its sleeve. I was initially going to go through all of the shit that I don't like about it and then say that at the end, but it's like, I'll give it some credit and put it at the beginning. So so it's like, it's not as bad as it might sound when you go through all the bad shit in it. If that's, yeah, if that's sounds appealing at all. But to talk about it being a lot of territory we've already covered, obviously it is about a dude that is in some sort of action and ends up shot to death, and then through, sci-fi movie technology, they bring him back to life. And so you're like, oh, well, that's, RoboCop, pretty much. And then it's like, well, okay, he's a soldier, so it's like RoboCop with a soldier. Like Universal Soldier. So, that's our starting point, and he can do the whole, it's more or less makes him invincible if he gets shot or blown up or something. He can more or less regenerate it. There's some cool scenes where he gets shot in the face and half his face gets blown off and then it just puts itself back together. It's done in by a shitty effect whenever this happens, but the idea is not bad. And the way it looks a little bit works enough to get the point across, even if the effects and the sound and the slow-mo that go with it end up botching it in the long run. And the way he is killed is by a bad guy that shoots him in the head, but not before he introduces himself by putting on Talking Heads' Psycho Killer, wearing long socks with sandals and a winter coat, and dancing. So it's one of those movies where the bad guy is super crazy, and we'll go into all that. But the thing is I I don't want to get back into the territory of Guns Akimbo already, but I'm just now starting to block it out of my head. But yeah, we're back into the whole... They thought they were making some really cool villain here, I think, until somebody brings up later that specific scene in detail and say that it came off as a massive movie cliche. Somebody in the movie says that. Now, you can take that as all the movies being self-aware, but it's also a case of maybe it's just damage control. Because it's over an hour later into this movie that's not even 2 hours before somebody points out, God, what a cliche that was. And then it's like, how about the people you actually fooled into thinking that was something cool to do, and they went along with it, and then an hour later you say, that was such a cliche. That was so fucking dumb. How does your audience who was into it feel? But whatever, fuck them, I guess. And then we get into Guy Pearce coming into this movie. I think I read it was supposed to be Michael Sheen, and then he had a scheduling conflict. So either way, they were going to get somebody that's way too above this kind of thing. Regardless of the things that Michael Sheen has done with his career, he still has enough merit that he would have been above this anyway. And you can say the same thing about Guy Pearce. And Guy Pearce is basically here just to be an exposition machine, as you would probably guess. That's usually what they get the recognizable actors for in movies like this, for some reason. There are so many things that Guy Pearce is capable of. If with the kind of character he plays in this, if you had made this character maybe closer to Charlie Rakes in Lawless, you would have been giving Guy Pearce something to do, at least. But they don't, really. I'm not even sure how they got him to sign up for this. There's got to be more interesting things that he could be doing. But instead, he gets stuck with all that dialogue. It's one of those people where I love... he finally did something. The movie's still stupid enough to do it, so this isn't really forgiving it for this. But I remember just recently, like within the last couple of months, talking about that cliche that's especially in a bunch of action movies, where nobody ever in the history of ever, I don't think, has said the letters EMP in a movie without them having to immediately follow it up and inform the audience and the characters in the movie that that stands for electromagnetic pulse. And we get that same fucking line in this too. And even though it's still annoying, and they should really put that shit to sleep and never use it in another line of dialogue in any movie ever again, I was grateful that Guy Pearce was there to say, I know what the hell EMP is! But it is still there, and we need to get rid of that as soon as possible. It seems like a small thing, but when you see enough movies, it becomes a big thing. So, yes. And then, speaking of cliches and shit that just needs to fucking die and never be in another movie again, we've got a serious editing problem, especially in the action scenes, but you've also got the moments where, obviously, when Vin Diesel is resurrected into whatever the hell you want to call what's in, there's, like I said, a whole exposition dump is done in the whole first Guy Pearce scene, so it's all in there. But, what's happened here also is, obviously, his memories are gone now, too. But, so you think that's going to be, alright, so we're kind of starting this character from scratch, and he'll spend the movie kind of putting the pieces together, and then there'll be some emotional revelation, and we might, Vin Diesel might actually have to act a little bit. Every now and then he gets a little something to chew on. In a movie like this, that's kind of unexpected, as far as, like, emotional beats go. But the thing here is that he immediately starts, the memories sort of come back to him very quickly. And if you've seen a movie in your life, how do you think the memories come back to him, especially this early into the movie, after he's just been informed that he has no memories? Oh, you better believe there's a scene of him sleeping, where he's dreaming and having obnoxious flashes of imagery that we saw earlier in the movie of his wife. So yes, of course we get that. Why not? And then basically, it's probably not even been on for half an hour, and his memories are there now. Like, it's like they didn't even use the obnoxious flashing that much, because they were just like, it was almost like the writer went all the way to like the half-hour mark and then was like, I'm not so keen on this taking his memories thing. Maybe that was a bad call on my part. And it's like, well, should we go? There's two writers, so it's like, should we go back and rewrite it then, do something else? Maybe just write out the scene where his memories are gone. Like, no, we're just gonna keep that in there, and we're just gonna throw the memories right back into him. So it's not a problem anymore. We can just keep moving ahead because we don't give a shit. Why would we? And there's also, if you want to talk about more technical problems outside of the editing, there is, I don't know what the fuck is up with the sound. There's a lot, there's a lot of lines in this movie for some reason that seem dubbed in post. Because it's one of those movies where a lot of the dialogue is, like, off-screen for some reason. Where, like, there's even especially a point in time when, relatively close to the end, where a character says something from, like, a distance to a character that's, like, a bit up the road a little bit. And just in the sound alone, you can tell it's a dubbed-in line. Like, it doesn't match at all. And it's weird how much of that there was throughout it. Especially when they bring in... he gets a comedy relief character to help him out. The proverbial guy in the chair dude comes in and it serves as the comedy relief. And he is... It's driving me insane. I can't remember the actor's name, but he was the guy in Game Night. He was one of the guys in Game Night. And in a comedy relief in a movie like this, it's not flawless. There are going to be lines that don't entirely work and are not that funny when they're supposed to be. But for the most part, I was surprised that the comedy relief was actually funny in many instances, if not all of them. So, and he comes in the second half, which, much like the comedy relief a lot in movies like this, even if he is, funny for quite a bit of his screen time, he still feels like he's in an entirely different movie anyway, especially when he shows up later. But, some of the stuff that they do actually get to work does work okay. Like, talking about all that stuff I talked about before, like the cliches and all that, and the other movies that it's like, which there's a long list of, RoboCop and Universal Soldier are just like, the tip of the iceberg of, oh, well, this reminds me of this, and this reminds me of this, and so on. Which makes it a very easy movie to, like, rib and make fun of. But it does, like I was saying, have some ideas, like, up its sleeve, and it's able to, like, sort of... it knows how to play with its concept a little bit in ways that aren't too outlandish that they would make you just give up on it entirely. And it's like, oh, they're trying to be more creative with it. Because they're like, this is a movie that could have taken its one concept and then just made it a straight line, but it tries to do some things that, like, shake it up and throw in some, turns and stuff like that. So that was actually kind of appreciated the more it went on. So it was like, I don't know that it completely grew on me, but it's when movies like this get bad enough, it's like, it's actually a relief when they even try. It's like, usually, if, like, that's kind of that's where you need to be starting, but that's as far as this movie gets with the expectations for a movie like this. It's like, alright, you're getting there. There's something in here that could work, eventually, if you had maybe kept writing and kept going back to stuff and maybe tried again, a few scenes here and there, but, yeah, so... That is kind of a breath of fresh air in a movie like this that could have just tried to be dumb the entire time. Like, I do think this is a movie that is, like, when it's dumb, it's not flat out trying to be, like it feels like some movies are. So, yeah. Or maybe I'm just being too easy on it because it's not an absolute, total, and complete irredeemable piece of shit. We already had one of those the last time I did one of these videos, so there's that. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all that's really here. The side characters, apart from the ones I mentioned, aren't really all that memorable, so, or worth mentioning, so that's pretty much what that is. So, it's not really that great, but it could have been a shitload worse, I'm sure. So, let's go into The Hunt, a really easy movie to talk about. Well, for starters, let's not give it too much credit. This whole controversy thing surrounding this movie, where it was supposed to come out in like September of last year, and then a lot of people seem to misinterpret what the movie was, or what, like, there seemed to be a lot of misinterpretation of who were the protagonists versus who was the antagonists in this movie, and it got all jumbled, and there was apparently enough controversy that they decided to they took it off the schedule. They didn't even reschedule it immediately. They just took it off the schedule entirely for a time period there. And then that was about it. Like, I don't even really remember the controversy being that big of a deal. Honestly, it lasted for like a day or two. And I don't think it had as much attention as the makers around it seemed to think it did. Because now the marketing is surrounded by this so-called controversy, and the whole thing of this is the most controversial movie of the year is one no one has seen. And it's like, did people even remember what you were talking about when you started advertising like that? Because it kind of disappeared from relevancy the second they pulled it from the schedule. And then nobody gave a shit anymore, if they gave a shit the first time around. So that, and coming from Jason Blum, who, when you look at the way he uses his budgets versus how much his movies make, regardless of if his movies are great or if his movies are shit, because he's definitely made both of those, you really come to admire him as a businessman, just in general. So something this desperate in the marketing seems weird and unnecessary, but, you know, there it is. So, talking about the movie itself, I don't know if people haven't seen this yet and they come across this for some reason. I don't really know what you can say that's a spoiler and what isn't. It's one of those. So, I'm not gonna like flat out say spoilers, but there's some stuff that I might hint at that you may not want to hear if you want to go into something like this blind. But once again, I don't know why you would come to a video where I talk about movies for a good 10 or 15 minutes each if you were trying to go in blind, so that's really on you. But anyway, yes, so really all it is at its core is another interpretation of The Most Dangerous Game. It's another take on that, which we've seen many, many times over from a number of different eras in movie history. So, like, the Joel McRae version of Most Dangerous Game was, what, 1932 or something? So we're going back at least that far. So, yeah, every now and then I suppose people try to change that up a bit. And this one, really the only thing they do is they add politics into it. And it's not even really... I don't know. But the thing here, though, is talking about there being spoilers so early is the fact that there's two ways you can take the first 15 minutes of this movie. You can either take it as it's a good thing that they get it started right away, and there's a lot of major things happening, seemingly, very, very quickly. In the first 15 minutes, you are just bombarded with shit that might completely catch you off guard for the entire rest of it. It's only like an hour and a half, but the first 15 minutes, a lot of shit goes down. However, you can also look at this as a very played-out method of convincing audiences that anything can happen, and doing the thing where it's basically done for shock value. Like, you put people in this movie whose names and faces people recognize that you learn quickly is basically for nothing more than shock value. So, yeah. So that's probably the most spoilery thing I can say. And now going into this, talking about the whole angle they take of making this different from any other interpretation of the Most Dangerous Game is the two sides that the people land on and recognizable personalities that you might see if you've spent way too much time on the internet. So that's what they do. And when you look at the way they handle like the violence and like the gore is like really over the. I wasn't expecting this to be as gruesome as it is. This is a gruesome as fuck movie, which would honestly kind of be a little bit refreshing if it's pulled off well and it's done in like that. Like it's so over the top. It's in that way to where it's not like when the violence happens, it's not like, oh my god, that's so brutal. It's, oh my god, that's so over the top. You know, like the cartoonish violence. Which is fine, and suits a movie like this, especially for the kind of tone they're going for. I honestly don't have a problem with how over the top the gore is, because that is one of the few things in this movie that actually fits in place. So because of that, this whole movie could have basically been just kind of another... I mean, it's not too different from many others, but at the same time could still be, you know, kind of a fun, guilty pleasure gore fest for the people that are into that kind of thing. But it really kind of takes away from that when you so blatantly put the messages in it and who is supposed to represent who and so on. And you're reminded of this constantly, where like somebody will say some sort of buzzword and you're like, well, they're definitely supposed to represent that group, and then somebody will say another buzzword from another side and it's like, well, that person's definitely that. And then it's like, now is this just terrible, terrible writing for these characters? Are they trying... I mean, they're clearly going for a satire thing, but at the same time, it's like, but who are you satirizing and for what reason exactly? Like, at the end of the day, what are you trying to accomplish by doing this? And who are you trying to make a point to? Because they do very over-the-top, you know, parodies of the kinds of people on the both sides, the people that are... Yeah, it's just all the terminology. Like, there's all the people over here that think everything it's that whole thing. You know exactly what I'm talking... I'm trying to find the example to use, and I just don't fucking want to, because I don't want the words in my mouth. But from either of these, because what they do is, instead of putting any nuance in any of these characters whatsoever, that's what it is it's all the extremes of this side versus all the extremes of this side. The only thing they did to kind of turn it on its head was you take the very extreme angles of both of these groups, and the ones that you would expect to be doing what the antagonists of this movie are, from the point of view of looking at both sides as extremes, it's reversed. I think that's what they're trying to do. I don't know. And it especially gets to that point when, because obviously it seems like it's pretty one-sided. Like, if you were to go into this, you would see it as they're all about making one side look really evil and the other side look victimized. But then you bring in the Ethan Suplee character, and Ethan Suplee's character is such a blatant parody, I hope. As far as how the writers were writing the characters, I am hoping this was parody and not their idea of like a serious character. And then that's only then does it click that it's like, alright, it's supposed to be the extremes of both sides, but then what? Then you watch them all kill each other. Okay. And then that's... Yeah, so it's like, I feel like they really think they're saying something about the state of politics and the whole two-party thing, but they're really not saying anything that really anybody could, like I said, just spend one day on the internet and come up with this and say something just as not all that informative that we don't already kind of. But that's kind of the thing too, though, is that it's interesting to call it parody when they do the full-on extremes of both sides, because if you look around enough, those people actually exist. So at what point is it parody and at what point is it not? There's no real line here, and there's no clear objective of what this all is supposed to mean, given the outcome of this movie and what happens to which character and what that character stands for, or whatever the fuck. I don't know. There is a hero. There is certainly a hero to the movie, like one singular hero, being the Betty Gilpin character. But the problem with this is that, and I don't really. I've seen her in stuff, but I don't really remember. She hasn't made an impression on me yet, I guess. Because like prior to this movie, I probably wouldn't have been able to put a face with her name. I think she's mainly popular for Glow, which I haven't watched yet. And I only know about that because she's shown up at some award shows for it. But she's a character that's kind of seems like she's more stuck in the middle than anything else. But she's supposed to be like the hardcore hero, where she's got the same like frozen facial expression through the whole movie, but at the same time has like that attitude that's supposed to be like cool and sassy or something. That's what they seem to be going for. But pretty much every time she has a scene, it just kind of feels like the writers sucking their own dicks. There is a scene where Betty Gilpin's character tells the story of the tortoise and the hare to another character. And we all know the story of the tortoise and the hare. We hear it in fucking kindergarten, if not sooner. I had a little storybook when I was like 3 or 4 that had the fucking story of the tortoise and the hare in it. And these writers are so self-congratulatory. It takes her like 5 minutes to tell the story of the tortoise and the hare. And 5 minutes is a long-ass time to tell that story. So you can only imagine how much this is dragged out by the fantastical way this character tells this story, because the character has so much personality. And she's so hardcore because in her childhood the story had a different ending that's a lot darker and whatever the hell. It's basically an excuse to give her motivation at the very last second of the movie. So, yeah. I was kind of in the middle on this movie, but the more I talk about it, I think the more I maybe don't like it so much. If you hadn't noticed. So, I don't know. And then as it goes on further, she's one of those characters that starts doing the whole "I'm so crazy" eyes every time she kills somebody, and it's dumb. There is a main villain in this movie, and it's weirdly handled because it's an actress that, and I don't look at any of the advertisements. I've been saying that forever, since 2014. I don't watch the fucking trailers. I don't watch the fucking TV spots. I try to avoid just about everything. However, the main antagonist of the movie is a well-known actress that I knew was in the movie. I can't remember how, but I'm pretty sure I knew going in this person was in this movie. But for some reason, they play it up like nobody knows she's in the movie, because they obscure her entirely until like the last 20 minutes. And then she's got a big reveal. Now, when I say big reveal, I mean she's just a voice and the back of a head for like most of the movie. And in the last 20 minutes, she's having like a whole monologue, and the camera's still in the back of her head. And then it very, very, very slowly comes around and finally reveals who she is. And it's like, well, yeah, no shit. I mean, if you're familiar with her enough, and she's quite famous, you should be, you could recognize her voice instantly. um, why am I even hiding it? I'm just gonna straight up tell you if for some reason you don't know, and if you're watching this and you like know the people in the cast, I'm talking about Hilary Swank. And surely anybody hearing this is probably that hasn't seen the movie would probably say, "Oh yeah, I knew she was in it." I would think. I don't know. This movie is only an hour and a half, and I think I spent more than an hour and a half saying, "I don't know why you would do that," throughout this movie. So yeah. So like I said, I mean, if you want like some over the top gore fest, you've got it. You just got a lot of other shit in there that's going to make you wonder, why did they go that route? What are they trying to say? What is the point of this exactly? I don't know. I mean, I guess it's one thing. I mean, in a sense, in certain cases, maybe it's like you kind of don't want them to take a side, because if they do, it would make the movie really predictable, and you can see, and people get like really, tired when they see like an obvious agenda or some kind of thing going on. But when you also play it as just like basically full on anarchist, I guess is what they're going for, like a fuck both sides kind of thing, or at least fuck the extremes of both sides thing, which I'm sure most people would agree with. So who are you preaching to but the choir, which is the easiest fucking thing you can do? I don't know. I don't know what this movie wants. I don't get it. But I mean, if you were just trying to set out to do a fun, campy, most dangerous game sort of thing, you could have just done that, honestly. But trying to make it this whole political message thing, or maybe not, I don't fucking know, then you just kind of, and if you don't, and you probably could, maybe you could have made this something really, really charged. You can obviously do politically charged things and still make it work. Black Klansman was my favorite movie of a couple of years ago. What the hell is this shit? I have no idea. So, there it is. I don't know what the hell it is, but it's there, telling us something or nothing. And all that supposed controversy for this. Who's gonna remember this movie? I don't know. But here we are. Alright, let's end this on Big Time Adolescence, which I'm not sure. It was supposed to have a theater run on the 31st. I'm going to assume that's not going to be happening. But it was put on Hulu this weekend. It was either this weekend or last weekend, but I just got around to it. And this was a movie that was built up for a little bit last year. It was shown at Sundance 2019 and got a really good reception. Like, I remember a lot of really early word was coming out that was great, and there was a lot of praise for like Pete Davidson's performance and stuff like that. And then it just kind of vanished. After that kind of response, I'm not sure why it would take over a year to come out. But because that may, if some people think about that too much, it may give the movie kind of a damper reputation that it doesn't deserve. Because it shouldn't have been that hard to put out there, because there's quality here. It's maybe some people will feel tired of it before they even see it, because they'll get vibes immediately just hearing what it's about and what kind of movie it is. The fact that we just had mid-90s, where we're starting to get these, because obviously like it felt like the peak of the coming of age movie was in the 80s, and then we got some great ones in the 90s. But now that we're in these decades, because it's fucking 2020 already, now our coming of age movies are starting to show up in territory like this. And yeah, this is basically, mid-90s without skateboards. But I do think I liked mid-90s, but I think I like this more. And I don't know if it might be that the kid is more like the coming of age movies like this probably depend a lot on how much you can relate to the character or how much you can't. Because if you can't, it might, make you feel a bit more cold to it. But obviously, the best movies like this would be to make a character that is relatable and you can feel for, and makes the situations feel real, but you don't necessarily have to have shared experiences with. And I do think I felt closer to this kid than I did the kid in mid-90s, because this whole story is an interesting little setup that I don't think you see in many movies like this, at least not portrayed in this way. And that is the fact that he is, because based on the little bit of advertising I saw, like a poster here and there I had assumed that Pete Davidson was like an older brother to this kid, and it was like the relationship between the kid and Lucas Hedges in mid-90s. Um, but their very interesting relationship starts with the fact that Pete Davidson is dating his older sister, and the three of them hang out together. And then when he and the sister break up, he and the kid just keep hanging out, and the kid ends up, growing up to be like growing into 16, and he's still hanging out with the guy. They're like best friends still, um, which is pretty bizarrely close to not entirely, but the fact that I basically grew up with. I didn't really have friends my own age outside of school, especially after I left school. But before I'd even left school, all of my closest friends were my older brother's friends. And so this kind of brought that back a lot. And it's, like I said, not all the experiences. Like, it wasn't the whole thing of, I was introduced to, like, drugs or alcohol early or anything like that. It was usually, like, in a different room or not around me. But, and I wasn't really much interested in that anyway. But even with that, with the direction this movie goes in that regard, still just the setup was relatable enough to where the rest of the movie became infinitely more interesting to me than a movie I could probably relate to less, at least in its opening moments. Um, and the whole thing is handled really well. There is a cut in this movie at the very beginning, and just this one transition from one scene to the next, like in the first 5 minutes, it was one thing that made me say, "Wow, I think this might be really good." It's this moment when it's the lead in to he and the sister breaking up, which is like the opening moments of the movie. But it starts with them at like a carnival, and they're playing this game to see who can pretend to cry the best. And so Pete Davidson takes his turn, and he pretend cries. Then the kid takes his turn to pretend cries, and then Pete Davidson looks at the girlfriend and says, "Okay, now you." And it cuts to her really crying while they're breaking up. And it's like, that's an awesome cut. that is yeah. So it's like in that moment I was like, I think there's going to be something to this movie. I feel like this movie is going to be a lot more clever than it might seem, and maybe not as derivative as it might seem, or not as familiar as it might seem, given the setup and the kind of movie it is and the kind of things it's going to be exploring. And it pretty much kept that up throughout. And I think something that does keep it afloat quite a bit is Pete Davidson's performance and this character in general, because, and I know Pete Davidson, like, annoys a lot of people, and I can totally get it. But here in particular, he makes the character that really should not, because the whole question is, why does this kid hang out with this total incomplete loser? But the thing is when every time they have a scene together, we're never really asking that, because, like, the other characters in the movie, like his parents, are asking that, and we totally get why they're asking that. But we as the audience don't really have time to ask that, because the character wins us over so early. And then, like the kid in the movie, we just kind of go with it. Like, by the time he and Pete Davidson are hanging out longer than they probably should be, when the kid should really be hanging out with kids his own age, it's like, we just, through his point of view, we just went on, and it was already the normal, that these two would be best friends, regardless of the very different paths they started on, and the fact that the kid was much younger at the time when they started hanging out. And the fact that Davidson's able to find that, both those sides of the immature guy that's always making the bad decisions, but also the guy that's just so likable you can't help but keep hanging out with him. And he keeps getting, like, really ill-advised tattoos. He keeps, like, smoking weed and getting him to drink, and doing a shitload of extremely irresponsible things that would probably get him in more trouble than we're used to seeing kids get in trouble in movies like this. Like, more. Like, really illegal shit. um, Yet somehow the character wins us over so much that we always, no matter how dire the situation gets, and we're like, dude, you need to stop fucking hanging out with him, we still understand why he keeps going back. And just like I said, the fact that that's just the normal of his life, and that's how he's grown up, and they just really make it believable to where it's, you're just in it before you even have time to ask yourself those questions or ask the movie those questions. And this is helped a lot by the contrast of this, the Force kind of fighting against this that kind of builds throughout the movie. The protest of his parents, particularly his dad, who is John Cryer, who of course is very familiar with coming-of-age movies, or one in particular. And to see him on the side of the concerned dad, it's like, Ducky has now graduated to be Harry Dean Stanton now. They had, enough meetings in lawn chairs in the front yard that Ducky's now the hopefully responsible dad. And the dynamic between him and Davidson, they only have like 2 or 3 scenes together. But they're the scenes you kind of wait the whole movie for. And they do really pay off. And in really real ways too. Like, nothing, not too much. I guess there's some things. But not too much feels like blown out of proportion for the sake of drama. Like, a lot of it, most of it feels like super, super grounded and believable. Which really does keep it afloat. And I think the most important thing to take away from this, in regards to how they pulled that off, is that it's a movie that doesn't cop out when it very easily could. There are many moments in this movie, especially in like the last 10 minutes, where it could just totally cop out. But it stays true to all of its characters in a way that is kind of a gut punch in such a downplayed way. Like, it's not till the movie's over that you realize how much of a gut punch the last 10 minutes or so are. To where, like, it has to settle in, and you start to realize, like, and you put together, like, where these characters could potentially end up, or where they'll end up, or whatever. And will they still be friends, or will they not? And it's, yeah, so they really, so yeah, this is definitely the kind of area we want to, the only problem now is, like, now that this movie feels like it's, straight off the path so much and kind of gone into a absolutely no cop-outs direction, is it's like, we've now set a precedent for, we're gonna get to a point where if enough movies do this, we're gonna want to go back to the whole, God, I just want, an uplifting ending or a totally 100% happy ending or something like that. But in the meantime, since it still feels fresh, I think you can still say, without too much caution, there should be more stories told like this, that don't, try to back away or try to do things too easy. Which is great. There's a couple of things here that might be, oh God, what's her name? The girl that was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. She is one of Pete Davidson's girlfriends in this. There's a whole subplot with her that I don't think entirely rings true. And she's a character that just kind of, I like the way they handle this character in regards to the test it puts on a friendship. But just the character's whole purpose in general feels like kind of tacked on, and like they're like just not entirely necessary. Like, there are plenty of other ways to further the main characters that this character does. They could have probably done in a kind of a smoother way without a character that was otherwise pretty pointless. And there's something that I kind of wish they'd kind of gone a little bit further into. Like, something that's just a little bit underdeveloped is the relationship between Davidson and the older sister, the kid's older sister. Where there's like where she can't kind of, we understand, we were talking about how the kid can't really get rid of him because just kind of the attachments there and the friendships there and all that, and just his charm and likability in general. And that there's also the older sister, even despite having an ugly breakup with him, is kind of somewhat going through the same thing in her own way, And it's like there's definitely something interesting there and kind of a parallel, but I think it's a little too underdeveloped. So yeah, I would say the movie could almost be a little longer if it wanted to, but it's also kind of it's I think like an hour 30, almost exactly like an hour 30 or hour 31, and it's yeah, holy shit, 3 movies in 1 week and none of them broke 2 hours. It's a fucking miracle. So, and they all more or less handled their runtimes relatively well. I don't know, The Hunt started to feel long, but you know. So yes, so I would definitely check out Big Time Adolescence on Hulu if you have not. Even if you're not much of a fan of Pete Davidson, maybe he'll win you over here before his whole Apatow movie thing, which we'll see. I have more faith in him than I do Apatow. I don't know what that says, but we'll see what happens with that and see if he can lead a second movie as well. So, that's going to be that. I don't really know what's going to be coming. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what all is on Netflix's slate, and we don't know what is going to happen with the streaming sort of thing. Because, like, we were talking about, all the stuff I believe that's on streaming so far was the stuff that was already in theaters. So, obviously, I'm putting the pieces of my heart back together after A Quiet Place had to delay, but yeah, it was at the same time it was kind of a relief that I wouldn't have to risk going anywhere. So there is that. So it was a yeah. As far as versus goes, I do have quite a few of those planned to fill in the blanks if there aren't enough of these. Actually, the first one I was going to do even before this review video was Contagion and Outbreak, obviously. But it occurred to me, maybe people are a little sick of hearing about that for the time being, so I'll probably eventually do that one, but I don't know if it'll be anytime soon. So we're just going to fuck around and do some random ones. The first verses we're going to do, one of them is a Tom Hanks movie. That's just a bizarre coincidence that he has obviously been in the news for the past week and a half or so. Because I was going to do that one anyway. So I'm just still going to do that one. Because they're two amazing movies and I would like to talk about them. So until all that stuff, we're just going to kind of go with it, I guess, and see where we end up and how long this goes on. But until then, I think that's going to be it for this.